I'm going to record now the lecture that I would give in class if this class were meeting in a classroom. What I'm going to do right now is run you through what you need to do for website construction, the learning materials, and the preparation for the assignment itself. I've given you this one-page sheet that lists all of the readings. For website construction, you're going to click here to access what you see on the screen right now. The World Wide Web Consortium maintains learning materials that are actually one of the best places around to learn HTML. And it's all free, and you don't need a book to do this. In fact, they give you everything that you need. Your computer is already equipped to do this. What you really need to take a look at is simply these three items. I've given you these other items listed here because in many cases people want to go farther, or you might want a little bit of reference. In fact, the assignment that I'm going to give you that's based on what you see in blue here does also make use of links and images. And you might need a little bit of reference on that, but these are very short pages and I'll show you what they look like in just a minute. Let's click this. You'll wind up at a screen that looks like this with this W3 Schools is just the W3 is World Wide Web. It's like W with an exponent 3. And this is not a for-profit place. This is run by the World Wide Web Consortium. Now you see a bunch of ads around here because these people pay to put their ads up there, and that's what supports this free site. Here's what you're going to do. Every one of these screens is rather short. It ends with this little pale green next chapter. So this is a little lesson in itself. You don't need anything besides this in order to learn HTML. You could download these because these will serve as an example for the work that I'm going to give you. So you just save it somewhere, and I would suggest that you create a folder and you can save things in there. Now I've already downloaded them. I suggest you set up a folder like this and download these also at this point. However, to start with, we're not going to use that. The only piece of information here you need to know is, what is the suffix? Well, it's either one of these. This is what it was when the web was designed in the Unix environment, and this is the way it usually appears on PCs because for a long time PCs had a limit of only 3 characters after the dot. That's as much as you need to do on this page. When we go to the next chapter, we're actually into this second piece here. Here's something that's really neat about this site. They tell you a little something. These tags here, that's the starting of a heading tag, and this is the ending of it. Try it yourself is really neat. I would strongly suggest you actually do these try it yourself exercises. What you do here, this is text to be displayed. And you can see this is heading 1. What governs the size of the text is the number here. So you'll see that this is heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It gets smaller. Now the edit and click me means this. Supposing I go here and I replace that number front and back. What's the effect of it? Well, I just edited it, click it here, and you see the effect of that. Now if I change it to some other value, perhaps 3, now it changes to the same size as 3. So you'll see number 1 is the largest heading, and number 6 is the smallest. This is just a convenience in establishing different sizes of type. The markup here comes from earlier publishing days when copy was marked up this way for a typesetter. What you see here is the beginning of a web page, and this is the end of it. And you've probably caught on by now to the fact that a tag begins this way. The tag is the same for the conclusion of it, except it has a slash before whatever the coding is. Now if I close this up and I come in again, it starts out fresh. this doesn't get saved, but it's a very nice way without you having to go anyplace else where you can start playing with some HTML. So get familiar with that one. Now, paragraphs. Paragraphs are set off by themselves. Let's try this. And once again, a really great way to learn is to mess around with this stuff. So let me take the paragraph tags out. When I do that, nothing happens. Interesting. How about this one? Now you see the second line has moved up. I'm going to put a 1 here, a 2 here, and a 3 there. And now you see the effect of that a little bit more clearly. Let's take this tag out and this tag out, and now it all moves up. Now I'll throw in a little something extra for you here. You can code a tag BR. It stands for break. Let's see if this makes any difference. You see what happened? I forced a break at that point. Now if I want to force a break there, I can do this, and now it straightens that out as well. So break starts a new line. What happens if I put 2 breaks in there? Now I get the same spacing, almost as a paragraph. So there's more than one way to skin a cat in HTML. Now let's be a little fancy here. Let's try something we learned from a prior page. I'm going to put a heading 1 tag in here, and then the end of the heading 1 tag. What do you suppose will happen this time? There we go. Heading 1, and it just got bigger. Play with this. This acts like a browser in interpreting what the HTML does. This is really a nice thing they've set up. In order to help you learn this, ordinarily you would code this with a text editor or even with Word and output it as a TXT file. It's a little awkward with Word because Word tries to code HTML for you. If you output it as HTML, it may switch into a mode that makes it seem sort of like an HTML editor. And on the Mac, even the simplest text editor program called TextEdit will attempt to write HTML for you. So in the PC environment, we recommend you use Notepad, which is a very simple, dumb text editor that you find in the programs and accessories. On the Mac, I would suggest you use Word, but make sure you output things as a TXT file. Then you may have to rename that to have an HTML suffix, and you can open it up with a browser. What this mechanism here is doing for you on the W3 School site is sparing you the inconvenience of saving this and then having to go into a browser to test it. You could, if you wanted to, in fact, even do a copy of this and paste it in to some place if this is some code that you formed that you really wanted. Let's go further now. Here in this second lesson, after paragraphs, they're talking about links. This is really interesting and powerful. With this kind of a statement, you can make one set of HTML branch to another page. You probably wondered at times how those links are formed in HTML, where something is underlined, and then by clicking on it, you go somewhere else. I use a lot of that in the PDF documents that I put out there for learning materials. What happens here is this is the beginning of the tag, this letter A, and this is the end of it. This reference here, hypertext reference, goes up to the quotation marks. This is a URL. So for example, if you wanted to put something in a set of HTML that when clicked would go to Google, you would put 3Ws google.com here, and this text would be what appears on the screen. This is not visible. Sometimes people actually put the same in both places so that you actually see the URL that you're going to. In other cases, they follow a style, as I've done in my writings, where I just say click here. Click here would be typed in here, and what's behind it is the URL where you want to go to. Here's where things get interesting. Every one of the pages that you create has a name. It's something or other .html. If you are in a website and you put the name of that web page in here, then this link will branch to that web page in your own site. Think about this as perhaps a menu and then some selections on that menu, each of which branches to a different page. Let's do the try it yourself here. Now, you see what happens. This is a link. Here's the link. If I click it, I wind up going to this page. What if I change this? What if I put in here Google? And it wraps around a little funny, but you see google.com. Now when I click this link comes up. Here's still the same text, but when I click it, I wind up going to Google. Let's do one more. If I put depaul.edu in here, and I click this, clicking the link goes to DePaul. So that's how this works. And this text here as well, I can change what that says. I could say, click here for DePaul. And now that's what gets displayed. And when I click it, the system goes here to that website. So you see, it's rather simple. This is a very powerful statement in HTML, and you're going to use it in the work that I give you. The same thing goes for images. Images are stored out there in a JPEG format, or some others, but JPEG is most common. And in Unit 3, you learned about JPEGs, and you learned how they are a compressed photographic image. Here, the tag is IMG for image, and it doesn't have an ending except that slash within the pointy brackets. What's being specified here is the name of a JPEG. Now in this case, that photograph is stored in the same place where this HTML is, the same website. That's why just simply the name of the photograph is there. If, however, that were being stored someplace else, we could have an HTTP address like this, a slash, and whatever the path name was to that image, and the image could come from some other place. That's a little more complicated. Many times that's done when a real website is built. The photographs are all put into a folder, and then this sort of a reference is made to it. Now actually, it would be sufficient without those specifications. It still needs the slash and the pointy bracket there in order to end it up. What this is doing, it's interesting, but it's a potential for error. And let me show you what happens here with the try it yourself. We're going to take a look at the image that they're presenting here. They've specified a width and a height. It seems kind of funny because this looks rather squarish, but there is a shadow down here that makes it taller than it is wide. The problem, you see, if we didn't do this at all, let's see what happens here. Well, it turns out the image is already the right size. And that's the best way to do things, to resize the image and make the image the size you want so that it transmits only the amount of information necessary to form that image. Normally, that would be the case and the coding would be this simple. If, however, this image is bigger, then you could have the extra specifications coded here. Let me close this and come back into it to get a fresh copy. What I'm going to do now is to distort the image unintentionally, perhaps. This is supposed to be 104 pixels wide. Supposing I make it 140 pixels wide. You see, I've distorted it. I've caused the browser to stretch it in that direction because I miskeyed this number. So it's really kind of bad form to code this when you don't need it, because there's always the possibility of getting the proportions wrong. Let me distort it a little differently in this way. Supposing instead of 142, I made it 180 by mistake. Now it goes too long, or maybe I made it in a major way. A mistake. Usually these kinds of distortions are not what you want. For that reason, I would suggest not coding the width and the height unless you are forced to use an image that's too large and you really do need to have the browser cut it down. In order to do the work that I'm assigning you to do for this project, you really only need to go this far. And I would suggest you do that and try things out. Then what we're going to do is to take a look at that HTML you downloaded, and we'll start using a browser. That's in the next video.